The new Hyundai Kona is headlined by the electric model, and it's more relevant than ever. As I expect, it's been improved in every area, including the electric powertrain, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let's talk about the design first. The Kona is more interesting than ever. It's a really striking design, and the electric model gets a few interesting bits and pieces of its own. As we've seen in the Hyundai Ioniq 6 and the Ioniq 5, there's a big focus on this pixelated light detailing, and the Kona Electric gets that too. All the way across here you have this full width light, and it's highly distinctive. It sits above the charge port as in the original Kona Electric, so it's a nice easy location. But this car is far more aerodynamic, a lot less drag through the air. As before, there are low set headlights, and they punctuate these big wheel arch design details. This carries through the whole side of the car, and it's actually quite a sculpted side. It's probably hard to see with this colour again, but it is distinctive, and if you have a lighter colour, silver, you can really appreciate all these slashes. It follows back to this rising detail in the window line, and that probably disguises the fact that this is actually an SUV. Echoing the front of the car, the rear lights also come from the wheel arches like this, though what stands out more is this full width pixelated light at the top here, and look at the bumper, the design detail is echoed there as well, so it's actually quite stylish in its detailing. None of that matters. It doesn't matter that this car looks more distinctive than before, that it's more interesting to look at. It doesn't matter even that the electric powertrain is better than before and the car is even a little bit more powerful. All that matters is that it's more practical. This car is significantly larger than before. Let me show you the inside. Where the original Kona had interior space akin to a Super Minis, the new one actually challenges the Hyundai Tucson for space. That's thanks to an extended wheelbase, and also the car is a bit wider. As you can see, I've plenty of space back here. Loads of headroom, plenty of room for my knees and my feet, and yet these front seats are actually set for adult space as well. Noticeably, the quality has taken a step up, and I'll touch on that a bit more when I show you the front. But back here, it feels of decent quality, everything is very solid. There's also plenty of features, so you have air vents for the rear passengers, which is always nice. You've got two USB-C ports down there, nets in the back of the seats for storage, and some small door pockets too. The back seats split and fold as you'd hope, and there are ISOFIX points on the outer ones. This extra wheelbase, incidentally, would be really welcomed by parents because, of course, these days kids have to be in rear-facing seats for longer, so you actually need quite a bit of space here. And this car is now suitable for having those kids in here. Before, it probably wouldn't have been. And while the rear seats are definitely more spacious than before and more useful, owners of the previous model will really notice this. The boot is significantly larger. It now holds 466 litres, which is comparable to some larger crossovers. Not only that, it's got some extra practicalities here. So this boot floor is variable over a couple of different heights. And even when it's at its lowest, there's space underneath for more. And there's a frunk, or, you know, if you're not American, space under the bonnet at the front. Up front, that sense of quality I mentioned in the back is more obvious. There's clear influence from the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6. This Kona isn't quite as luxurious as those cars perhaps, but it is well put together and decent materials used, and it feels like it'll last forever. There are some touches which reference the original Kona, and that's actually not a bad thing. What I particularly like is there's plenty of physical analog buttons and controls here in the middle. That's despite the fact that it's got the big Hyundai double screen here in the middle. So you've got a large digital instrument screen in front of you and a large touch screen in the middle there. And as with all Hyundai screens, it's very intuitive to use, it's sensibly laid out, and there are no gimmicks. As in the Ioniq models, you get a nice chunky steering wheel here, which is good to hold, and the drive selector is actually on the column here, so you twist it forward to go forward, twist it back to go back, press a button on the end to park. Very simple, very easy to use. The middle, the central console, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of storage. I really like these variable cup holders, so you push a button, it slips out, you put your cup or your bottle in there. If you actually just want to use the storage, you tilt it back. It's really useful. There's lots of storage space here, very practical. Ahead of that, Hyundai's new wireless charging pad is something I really like. It's got this rubberized surface, so even though you just put your phone down on top of it and it's visible, it's there all the time, it's held in place. It doesn't move around at all. Very clever. Above that, there are plenty of USB port options. So this has got two different USB-C ports here, and actually you select with a button whether you want to just charge the device or get it to connect to the infotainment system. That's a neat little feature, and you don't see many manufacturers doing that. behind this very tactile little button here as well is the 12-volt power socket. I mentioned the physical controls and physical buttons in the middle here, which we like to see, and we especially like to see it for the climate control. This has got dual zone climate control, loads of features built into it, including an eco mode, and it's all operated by these actual physical buttons. The final item of note is down here again in the centre console, got this rotary drive selector. I think it's a bit prominent for the car, not many people are going to change those modes very often, but it is there and there are several modes. Speaking of which, let's go out and test them. Now, these driving modes, they don't make a huge difference to the experience of the car. It hasn't got adaptive damping or anything like that, so they alter response to the accelerator, the power steering to a certain extent, and actually if you put it into eco mode, it also reduces the amount of air conditioning it uses. It tries to make it a bit more efficient. In sport mode, obviously, you get quicker response to the accelerator. There's also winter mode, which alters the traction control and again response to the throttle to make it easier to drive in low grip situations. For the rest of us, for most of the time, the Kona is all about comfort and refinement. It is not a sporty car to drive particularly, that's why I'm a bit surprised the drive mode selector is so prominent, but it is very competent. And I drove this car to Belfast and back from Dublin, and it is brilliant on the motorway. It's so quiet, so refined and so comfortable. That is what really stood out. And on a long journey like that, on a big motorway journey like that, you really get a feel for how efficient an electric car is. The Kona really impressed me. It was possible to average between 17 and 18 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and that's despite using the cruise control at the speed limit, so at 120 kilometers an hour for a lot of the journey, and yet it still managed that efficiency. That's because the car is really low drag, it's very aerodynamic, and that's something that Hyundai clearly worked on. In terms of range, depends which model you go for. There are actually two different battery sizes available in the Kona Electric. One is a 48 kilowatt hour battery, and the other one, the one we're testing here, is a 65.4 kilowatt hour battery. It has a range, official range, of a little bit over 500 kilometers, which is pretty impressive. And while I think most people will struggle to achieve that number, I think also most people will easily get 400 kilometers or a little bit more, even on the motorway. So I wasn't quite brave enough to go all the way to Belfast and back without trying to charge it. It didn't suit my time. I wasn't on an economy run or anything like that, but I suspect it would be capable of doing that. When you need to charge up, it can use a rapid charger up to about 100 kilowatts, or you can charge it up at home, or on actually a 3-phase 11 kilowatt charger too. I mentioned that it's not a sporty car to drive, but it actually has plenty of performance. So it has an uprated motor in comparison to the original Kona Electric. And that means it has over 200 horsepower here at your disposal. And it's plenty. It feels quick enough. Remember, this is not a big car. But now, having spent, I don't know, maybe 1,000 kilometers or so behind the wheel of this car already on Irish roads, I can say that the overriding impression is one of comfort. It is a car that is designed for long distances and for the comfort of all of its passengers, and it's quiet as well because of that. I mean, it's not just because it's electric. You know, there's not much wind noise, there's not much road noise. There's some road noise here up in the mountains where I'm driving right now, but that doesn't translate into the motorway as such. I like how Hyundai allows you to alter the rate of brake energy regeneration. So you've got these paddles behind the steering wheel here, and there's 4 different levels. So the top level is actually one pedal driving effectively. You almost never need to touch the brake pedal, whereas at the other end of the extreme, if you can effectively turn off the brake energy regeneration, or to a certain extent, and that the car will coast. And that's pretty useful on the motorway where you sometimes just want to cruise along. In comparison to the old Kona, this one feels far more mature, more polished, and I guess of higher quality. It reflects everything else we've said about it. That's our review of the new Kona Electric. I think you can see that we like it. It's far more spacious than before. It's a different car, to be honest. It's got the same name, it's efficient still, it's got all that it had before in terms of its electric goodness, but now it's probably more relevant for a bigger section of the population. So people with kids, people with families are going to realise that it has space and they can choose it for that. One final point to note is that it is still really good value, and in fact it's probably better value than ever now that it's a larger car, it's higher quality, and the amount of equipment it has as standard is also quite generous. So we think the Kona Electric is going to do very, very well. If you want to know more about the Kona Electric, and indeed any of the other Kona models and all of its rivals, pop along to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car.